listening to Final Frontier News.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Final Frontier News. I'm joined by Dave Rose to talk about ETs. Let's dive right in to the rabbit hole. Welcome in, everybody, to Final Frontier News. We are back. We are finally back after maybe a 2-month hiatus. I hope you're still out there somewhere listening and loving and liking and dreaming and thinking and wondering, because that's what we bring you today. We really don't know. There's a few topics that we want to sort of get to, focused on extraterrestrials and perhaps some other things that we can stray into, which there's plenty of stuff to talk about all around. And I think we're just going to kind of go all over the place here and see what happens. But right now we're really talking about extraterrestrials. Are they real? Are they here? Which ones are here? The different versions of them and species, and interdimensional and transdimensional. And are some of them us? Do they look like us? There's multiple ones that are, said to be easily blend in with us, and who knows what else they're capable of and what they're not capable of. And that's my opening statement on it. Dave, what do you have?
I think it's very important that we start off by first examining and defining the differences between aliens and extraterrestrials. Now, it's very important to remember that countless groups of people, ancient, aboriginal, indigenous people of this planet, time and time again in their legends, have mentioned people from the sky coming down. People who have helped them with their technology and even helped them avoid dying from multiple cataclysms that took place on the earth. These individuals taking these indigenous tribes into the inner bowels of the planet, what some might call the inner earth, to save them from deluges like floods worldwide, or earthquakes, or comets. So an alien is a being that, although exists on this planet and uses it as their home, is not a human. Is something that does not look human and that does not have the same characteristics as a human being. An extraterrestrial, on the other hand, just as the word indicates in its explanation, in its meaning, is that it's from off the planet. And we've again heard many times before in UFO mythology that there are beings that come to planet Earth from other planets. So this is a very important factor that we must first establish, that there is a difference when you say alien as opposed to extraterrestrial.
And there's a lot of what does it mean to you, Jesse? Jesse's here with us too, if anybody didn't know that.
I'm actually just kind of soaking it in. I'm still learning about this aspect of everything, to be honest.
But I mean, did you ever think like there's something?
Always. I mean, definitely. I just never. I went more into the spiritual aspects of things, and that's kind of why I never really got into the alien stuff. I just now started to kind of connect them a little bit. But I still don't know much about it on that side of things. So, but I've always, yeah, definitely been open to other. I mean, how could there not be other, worlds going on? You know?
Oh yeah. I mean, according to, many people, though, you've got the various, type of aliens and things that are coming here that are visiting us or that aren't visiting us, or a lot of people, overall, the mass population for the most part would believe that, basically.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I've kind of gathered amongst all these reading different people's views on all of these things. It is if there was an alien standing in front of us, you would only see him if you had an open enough mind to, in my opinion. Like, it's a lot of these people, I think, that are privy to some of this information. It's because first of all, their mind opened at some point to a level where they allowed this information to enter them without preconceived, notions that society may have based on, or just even that their own experience may have put on them through life.
A lot of it's experience.
It takes that to begin with, like, to be open-minded to what else could be out there, like, and then it kind of takes its way from there.
Well, to be honest, there are cases of abduction that people have reported and also ridiculed. That wasn't something that was within their perceptions. It came out of nowhere, and essentially they were abducted. So I don't necessarily agree with you in that sense that it is what is projected, and it is an external entity that apparently does interact with us human beings.
And are they being confused as ghost stories? Are ghost stories a separate thing? Are they the same thing? And yeah, the people that do them, I think one of the problems is with aliens and people's abduction stories is, you get some people who just seem crazy, some people who seem legit, some people, almost everybody seems to have a book, and it starts to make you wonder, are they doing it because they're just trying to sell books, or, is this legit? When I find a guy who goes around doing it who doesn't have any money, and, he doesn't have a book either, I'll be the more you don't have a book, and the less money you have, the more I tend to believe it. But I mean, it also makes sense to write a book, because where else are you going to go with, when you find this, something traumatic like this happens to you, what are you going to do? Go to the grocery store and work, or go to the office? You can't stop thinking about it. So I'd probably write a book or do a podcast, and I'd probably have to, make some income for myself, so might as well make it off of this actual true story that happened, and, see what happens, I guess. So, I mean, maybe I can't criticize that, I don't know, but there's so many different stories, sometimes it's hard to find out. Let me see why I just got a message here. I guess Jesse's having an issue with his connection or something. We just lost Jesse. Hold on a second. Let me fix him, get him back.
No, he's not on.
All right, well, we're back on Final Frontier News. All right, we're back here. We lost Jesse, but it's okay. Dave, you were going to make a point before we lost you here.
Yeah, I was just going to go over the different races that we have been told have visited the planet, or that may have already been on the planet. So, again, we're talking about aliens and extraterrestrials, those that are from the planet and those that are off the planet. So, one of the most common races is the Greys. Now, some people have called them the Zetas and have referred to them coming from Zeta Reticuli. These are the small 3 to 4 foot beings that are very thin, gray skin, large head, big black eyes, little slits for nose and a little slit for mouth, and very indescript individuals. And some people have said that they do come from off the world. However, the Hopi Indians have always had in their legends and myths a group of individuals that looked identical to as those that are described as the Greys. They've carved them out in their petroglyphs in the areas that they have inhabited in America, and they've referred to them as the Ant People. They've even gone so far as to say that the Ant People helped them during several cataclysms that affected the earth, whether they've been earthquakes, floods,
Yeah.
and even comets falling on the planet. So they've led these tribes of indigenous people, of natives, of Indians, into the inner earth, as some people call it, to keep them safe. But they've been referred to in their legends as the ant people. Now, if you take a look at
Are you speaking of the Greys or the Arcturian?
the Greys,
Okay.
the Greys, the 3 to 4 foot tall gray individuals
Yeah.
with big heads and the black eyes,
Right.
they've been referred to as the ant people. Now, if you think about it this way, if you were a being that lived under the surface of the planet and you were exposed to mostly darkness, well, what kind of features would you require to live there? Well, big eyes that are capable of taking in as much
Light as
light
possible.
as possible, even if there's minimal light.
Right. Right.
And you don't need other features that you might need on the surface. So there's been a lot of contention in regards to the Greys, whether they're actually
On the planet,
extraterrestrials from the Beta Reticuli system, or if they're actually native to this planet and are the ant people of the Hopi Indians.
That would be, it's very interesting. And speaking of the Hopi Indians, you bring up the Indians, not to jump around, but there's also always been a comparison that there's aliens that represent or resemble humans as well, and they're called the Pleiadian aliens. I think they're called Pleiadians, and they apparently
Some of them have been referred to as Pleiadians. Some of them have been referred to Nordics. And there's a few more that exist out there, but yes, some of them have...
well, the reptilians.
Well, the reptilians don't look like humans. Again,
Right.
we're talking about a particular race that is supposedly so similar to humans that they could pass off as one if you glance slightly at them.
It's a very interesting thing, and it's a very scary thing. The amount of people that have, it's almost similar to, I would compare it to like the Bible or like the stories that you hear about in different religions. How they all kind of sync up in a weird way. They all have a similar basis, even if they derived in different areas by different people, yet somehow they have the similar beginnings of stories, and it doesn't. Although, yes, some things could be coincidental because of the way that all humans eventually feel or think in that primitive time or advanced time, but these things just can't quite be coincidental. It seems crazy that they would be. And a lot of these premonitions, these showings, and these things that people have seen and been told about aliens or been shown through things that we've talked about on this channel before, like... we talked about audio visual traveling and things like that. What did we talk about before? What was it called? Remote viewing, like remote viewing, or just being, so whether it's time travel, remote viewing, entering a different dimension, whatever it is, and in different individuals who never met each other, never read each other's work, or maybe existed in different times, had experiences that were similar or were told similar things, and you could really put all the pieces together as, oh yes, we've seen this before. Whether it was called reptilian, aliens or not, they didn't know what it was.
Well, you bring up a good point, actually. The similarities between some of these races. And Quetzalcoatl is the winged serpent. Very famous, very well known in the Mesoamerican cultures previous to Christopher Columbus coming to America. And it also has to be understood that Quetzalcoatl, the winged serpent, did not have the tan brown skin and the same physical features as the Native Americans. Quetzalcoatl actually had a beard, had very pale skin, and had armor and headdresses that were not common to Mesoamerica. So when you take a look at this sort of information, you start to realize that, yes, you do have cultures from different parts of the world that strangely seem to be connected with symbols of the gods of, in our current time that we recognize, are not human. From those that came from the sky down to the earth. Different cultures out there have always said the same thing, whether they've called them gods, aliens, angels. They always seem to have that strange coincidence and similarity between the two. Something from the sky, something that can fly, something that looks different from the indigenous culture that is there and that shares their technology with them. We see different pyramid structures throughout the planet, but the same building techniques are used throughout. We can't assume that it's all isolated.
Yeah, it seems like something a long time ago happened, and it just it makes you really wonder, because it's easy to forget hundreds of years back, and I wonder how much was here, what kind of civilizations were here that we don't know about. We've talked about this on other shows too, about finding all these things. You wonder if the presence was here before, when they left, what happened, and if there was a presence, what did it end bad for everybody? We haven't found any really remnants of, well, we found a little bit of remnants, I take that back, of unidentified humanoid, bones or structures or bodies. So we have found some of that, but you would think that we would find more. So it's like, did they go someplace where they saved before? Is this have to do with Nibiru? Does this have to do with the planet that's on the outside? Dave, it's funny, we talked about this. I joked about this before too. The Planet X and the Nibiru and all that stuff, and whatever you want to call it. It's been called a million things. And then all of a sudden, what was it, 4 months ago or so, when NASA finally said, we call on everybody to try to help us locate this. We pretty much know it's there. They know that there's a mass deep outside the solar system, beyond Pluto, that's like 3 or 4 times the size of Neptune or something like that, or just I don't know what the sizing is. I'd have to look it up, but anyway, it's massive. If maybe I have the wrong.
It's sufficient enough to affect the inner planets and to actually send asteroids into the inner solar system.
That's what,
so clearly there's something there.
That's what it is. Is they don't know why these asteroids are coming at us, and this would explain it. Now that they've pretty much have an idea that it's there, and they can see it. I mean, I honestly believe that they know a lot more than we do, obviously, and they're even coming out and saying it, but they're starting to do it slowly. They're not just saying, let's have because that's not what you do, right? You don't have a big press conference and tell everybody, hey, guess what? Here it is, and it's on an elliptical orbit, and it's going to pass us. It's it actually gets close to us, at some point, So what do? You slowly start to roll out the information, and you let everybody gets used to it, right? Like most people say, Dave, if you bring this up to them, they have no idea. If you bring like Planet X or something up to them, they might be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that crazy thing. I don't know what that is.
Well, officially, NASA made their first statement on this in 1983.
Yeah.
And then they quickly erased that information.
Right. And now it seems like they're working us again. Like they're almost taunting you. Like, hey, everybody go ahead and go find it. Like they know that it can't be found right now, so they'll more disbelief. And even if it is believed, eventually, as the news comes out slowly and slowly, people get used to it, right? You get way more used to it. It's like when you talk about, it's funny because we talk about wrestling on a different show. So when we talk about like Finn Balor coming up, nobody knows what we're talking about, but it's like when you're talking about something happening, and eventually people get sick of it when it doesn't happen. So people just ignore it or don't care or don't find it a threat anymore. If you come out and say, there's this giant planet, and we don't know what it could be doing, and there's something going on, and we really need to study it because this bad stuff could happen, that would be a huge mistake. And what they've done so far is usually what they do is they don't say anything about it. But now it's going to be seen by people. We're going to start to see Planet X. We're going to start to see this thing eventually, and that's why they're coming out and talking about it, because if they don't, people are going to start seeing it, making their own assumptions, and things are going to go crazy. Now, people have
possible. It depends, though, where this actual orbit is.
Well,
If
yeah,
this
we don't
is
know.
just on the outskirts of our solar system, then we won't necessarily see it. It also depends
Well,
on what, in fact, Planet X
well,
is.
it depends on its orbit. If this
No, but
thing,
it also depends on what it is. Is it a planet? Is it a brown dwarf?
is
Because
it a
a brown
sun?
dwarf as a star
Yeah.
might be seen, depending on what hemisphere you're in, but a planet, especially a planet that might be similar to our Earth or even double the size, may not show up in the sky and may not attract enough reflection or may not produce enough reflection from the light it gets to be seen here on Earth. So it really depends on what this object actually is.
What do you think about the theory that this thing could be made of dark matter? People think that it's possible it's made up of dark matter. And
I
that
would have to say straight out, without even knowing the information that they're citing, that that is absolutely wrong.
okay.
That there's no reality in that because it doesn't even fit the characteristics of what dark matter is supposed to do.
Right.
But
Well,
let's move back onto the alien cultures that might inhabit our planet.
Well, and I want to tie it in real quick. The reason why I bring it up is because are they here to tell us? Are they here to warn us? Have they been here before? If this thing, Dave, let's say it is on an elliptical orbit where it comes around every whatever so many years, 3,000, 30,000, whatever it is. Did they come here and rescue us before and then take people off the planet or help us? Did they do that before? Are they planning on doing it now? Are they studying us to see if we're, a crop that's worth it? Put it that way. Could it be that type of thing? I'm not saying I necessarily believe that's what it is, but it's an interesting thought or theory. And now I believe we can move on. I just wanted to tie it up with that. That's why I brought it up.
Okay, well, I'll just end off by saying I don't think any culture that has the ability to travel to stars would wait for their planet to align properly to be able to make contact. So that's the end I'll say on that. But let's move back on to the alien and extraterrestrial races that could be on planet Earth. Now, the Dogon tribe in Mali, West Africa, worship a people called the Dogon. Now, apparently, the Dogon have a very strong connection to Egyptian culture, ancient Egyptian culture, dating back to at least 3200 BC. The Dogon apparently are amphibious people, people from the water, and there's been much speculation that the Pleiadians are also either similar or in fact the same intelligence, the same species of these water-dwelling creatures. And there's always been, especially in Sumeria with the Anunnaki, talk of a race of gods that would emerge from the waters. Now, there's two different waters in Sumerian mythology. There's actual water that exists here on Earth, and there's the celestial water that is essentially what they're explaining is space.
I
What is above the firmament.
Oh.
The firmament being the sky, that blue sort of globe that encompasses us when we look up and we only see blue. But when the sky goes dark, we actually see the universe for what it is. So that is what the Anunnaki, or the Sumerians, said the Anunnaki came from the outer waters, from the waters of outside the earth.
That's a great point you bring up too, because lots of things are interpreted maybe literally or generally, and
Exactly.
sometimes it's much more expanse than that, or expanded.
And that's something that I think you make a great point on, is that we also have to understand that ancient cultures, although they've written about this and it has actually been dismissed by mainstream science of today as being ridiculous, although it seems more and more that there's a lot more information to this than we actually give it credit for. But we can't forget that these cultures have said things that seem to match up with what we've observed. And it's very interesting to see how people can ignore this when these cultures have considered this a normal thing for literally thousands of years.
Right, and it's I'm very interested in those because there's just so many stories about, like, you know, the Palladians and the reptilians and all these aliens. But the Palladians are very interesting because they are the ones, like you said, that could, maybe not come from the water, but they're coming from outer space, and maybe they're dwelling in the water.
But maybe that's where that misinterpretation comes from
Right.
these ancient cultures, that when they said they come from the waters, and we say, oh, well, they're saying waters, it must be liquid H2O.
Yeah.
Maybe what they meant was from the outer waters, as the Sumerians said, the space, what's outside the planet.
And in Sumeria, I mean, it really comes down to studying what Sumerian text, what Sumerian knowledge was at the time. What were Sumerians usually referring to? What is it translating to? And they're normally talking about the sky or space. What do they normally say? If it's in that same sort of language, then you know that that it could be that. But if they have a clear definition of it, and they understand the difference of the sky, and they're not referring to the sky as the great ocean or the great water, So it really comes down to studying that, and I'm sure others already have done that. I'm just saying it to myself because I don't know where it came from. The primitiveness of the culture that was referencing this. You know what I mean? If I knew that, I could make a better assumption. But it's obviously very easy to connect the fact that they may not be speaking of the water. Chariot in the sky doesn't mean there's a chariot in the sky.
Great point. This is something that we also have to understand, is when a primitive culture says a god, it's not necessarily what in the Western culture is considered God. It's something, as they describe even in their own words, that which came down from heaven to earth. Clearly something that they don't understand comes down to the planet. And whatever being comes down to the planet and has technology that is beyond the comprehension of these individuals will be considered magic.
Right.
So if there was an advanced culture on this earth that survived or was able to somehow work around a giant cataclysm, any primitive cultures that were left over on the planet would see these individuals as gods, and they might be dressed differently, and therefore they would be interpreted differently. They would say, well, they're not human because they look this way, but they were wearing high technology, and obviously the primitives wouldn't understand this. So we have to understand that although primitive cultures have labeled things in certain ways, we do have to read between the lines and understand that maybe they didn't understand what they were fully seeing, but they are describing things in a way that is specific to their culture.
Now, if I look into tying up all the lore of this, we have the Arcturian aliens. They are apparently benevolent aliens. They have universal knowledge, and they're very spiritual, and they're very into mental health. Those are the Arcturian aliens. I believe that's one race. The other one would be reptilian aliens, which are, I guess, could be seen as the bad guys.
There's at least 2 or 3 different type of reptilian races that are that exist.
Well, supposedly the reptilians also created a clone. Created what were they called? They would be the Greys. The Grey aliens were apparently normally talked about as being cloned aliens created by the reptilians.
Some theories indicate that the reptilians created the Greys as a artificial android, a biological android that would work for them in these sorts of cases. So although they're made up of biological material, they are essentially an android.
That would be, and that's you talk about wild stuff, man.
Absolutely.
Now, but in the lore of, if you were to look up certain like people who write stories about this, or books, or like Zeta Talk, or those type of websites, it's mentioned a lot that they revolted against the reptilians, and they have just basically looked around the galaxy, and they're the most seen, the Greys, where they're kind of like not so much always good, but they're not bad either. They're kind of mischievous, I guess.
Well, that's actually interesting that you mentioned that they're most seen, because that would actually probably be more pertinent for the last, I would have to say, 26 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the 50s, it wasn't little gray men, it was little green men.
Yeah.
And we also saw a lot of reports during that time where the media hadn't clamped down on these statements and made a ridicule of what they were. And people were actually talking about different races that were out there that weren't being covered. But more common than not, you will notice that it became consistent probably in the early 80s that the little gray man was the alien that was out there to scare you. So the little gray, is only considered, I guess, a modern version of the alien that comes after you during these abductions. So previous to that, and there's a lot of reports on this, there was different types of aliens. There was aliens with big bat-like wings, some with covered in fur, some basically with no noticeable features. There's a lot of different types, and as always on this show, we always recommend that you look into this yourself and do the research. But I just wanted to bring this up, that the little gray alien, as we know it right now, is only a contemporary story to something that we've seen clearly into the past, going thousands and thousands of years from what all these different indigenous cultures are telling us.
And it's interesting to know again that you look into the mainstream, like we said, where most people, it wasn't too long ago that I thought when you brought up like, are there aliens? I would say to you, yeah, perhaps on some planet somewhere there must be something that exists, or maybe we'll find some like worm-like creatures or things that we never even really thought of. That would be my response. But now, it's more of, well, here's what's been documented as far as what people have been shown, seen, or believe, or what we've been hinted at through subjective proof throughout the years, and in ancient writings and hieroglyphs, or all those types of things. Through using those determinations, whether the specifics of some of these stories are actually true or not, that's an interesting thing. And are some of the people who are very smart with high IQs that come out with these stories, perhaps they could be Palladians themselves, because they want us to know about this. And I don't know. There's so much to it, and there's so many people doing it, and most of them are on the same path, have the same ideas, and have the same beliefs, and have had similar experiences, frighteningly similar experiences, and sometimes indifferent, depending on what happened. You wonder that if it can't be everybody can't be lying. I'm sure there's a lot of wackos, and a few wackos, and some people that are completely crazed. But you can't let all the crazy block some of the factual that could be out there. And what do you think about how they would influence us? Like, because
Well, first I want to say that mathematically, it's
Yeah.
already been proven that there has to be other intelligent life at our level of development somewhere out there in the universe, but not just another example. We're talking literally hundreds of billions of examples. Mathematically, it's just proven that way.
right, you got to believe that something is out there. I do too. I've
Now,
always
when
said
it
that.
comes to space travel, though, there are some large distances that need to be crossed. And although zero point energy is a well known thing, it isn't something that's popularly published. And its advantages when it comes to crossing vast distances of space isn't something that most people know about, but it is something that the military industrial complex knows about because you've got devices like the TR-3B and other disc and triangular shaped craft that can travel literally superliminally, which means faster than the speed of light. There are patents that prove this. There are white papers that prove this. There are government documents that prove this. All you have to do is find them. They exist, and I've seen them, and it basically proves, and again, theory-wise, you can prove this, that it is possible to create a craft using various types of technologies that will allow you to travel faster than light. And the best shapes are either triangles, globes, or discs. Now, when you compare that to, or when you consider that to all the different UFO sightings throughout the planet, you start to think, well, it might not necessarily be an extraterrestrial, something from off the planet. More likely than not, and I'm in the mindset that this is probably 99% of the time, what you see in the sky that you don't understand is not from outer space, but from this planet.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is, I mean, not just the idea of what we invented to travel into whatever. There's also the idea of just it more than ever. It seems like you can bend space, you can warp space to move through it. So they may not even need some of these things in speed of light. You may be moving at speed of light simply because we find out how to manipulate space.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is basically when you can warp space and time, you have the ability to cross such vast distances in such short amount of time that literally you are traveling faster than the speed of light, even though, according to some of this technology, you're not even moving. Your craft isn't moving. All it is warping space-time around you and forcing you to that location. So even though you're traveling faster than light, you're not moving.
Right.
So that's what I'm referring to when it comes to superliminal speeds.
Yeah, people never. It's one of those things you never think of that. When you think of, oh, I'm gonna fly through space, you think of, the things taking off like a rocket ship, like the Enterprise, like. Actually, in the new movie, there's a clouds, like a warping cloud surrounding the ship. That actually, for one of the first times in the new Star Trek movie, one of the first times I think, really sort of visualizes the ship almost plowing through space like a boat through water, yet it's like space is accepting the ship. Space is accepting it and allowing it to pass through as you warp through space and the density of space, where you're not rocketing, you're not using propulsion to move through it. You're warping through it. It's not impulse engines of a starship in Star Trek. It's warping, bending the space and time. It's like it's almost like when you're sitting there at a train station and the train next to you can't tell if it's you moving or the train. It's you're moving through space, but yet you're not moving. You're moving space for yourself, and that is always seemed to me like the way it would go. Because otherwise, how else could we travel so fast and so far physically?
Well, a NASA scientist by the name of Dr. Alcubierre developed what was called the Alcubierre drive, which is essentially warping space-time. This is the patents out there. This is already presented by NASA, and NASA's even worked on sort of fragments of this essentially to see its viability and such. The theory basically goes, you warp space-time so that in front of the craft, you're creating a sort of negative mass, and in front of it and behind it, you're creating a positive mass. So there's a lot of mass behind, a little mass in front. It's going to end up pushing this craft forward through space-time, but it's not even moving. So again, exactly like the warp drive that you discussed, this is now something that we have NASA even acknowledging as being potential.
Right. And when you're in space, I mean, you know, you look at the spaceship that NASA unveiled a little while back. They unveiled this spaceship. It was like a...
Are you referring to the ISS Enterprise?
Yes.
That's the one that uses this particular type of drive system.
So that will be, I mean, the only thing is, I believe we need to find out how to do it, right? Because we don't know really how to do it yet. It's a big theory that has precedent, though, and they need to figure out how to do it. And you know, if I remember, the spaceship kind of looked like the spaceship part itself looked like your average sort of spaceship, but a little bigger, almost like the ship from Aliens or something, or Alien. But it also had those two big spinning wheels to center gravity, right? Or to create artificial gravity.
Which is kind of strange, because if you understand this sort of theory, you know that once you create a field around a object like this, that you're already creating a gravity field, and you don't need those spinning rings to provide gravity to those on a ship. Now, perhaps this is something
when you drop out of the
new
warp
to the public, but if we take a look at old German patents, we see that this sort of technology has been around for quite some time, and that you create an internalized gravity system that doesn't require any sort of spinning centrifugal devices to create gravity, because the gravity is created on its own.
Here's the study. They've set up a test bed where they're going to use different mechanisms to try and generate and detect microscopic instances of little warp bubbles using a device called a white Jude? How to pronounce that? A white Jude? I don't know. Warp field interferometer. For now, they haven't found a way to bend the space, but the work has started. It's obviously, like it says, we're talking about a bunch of ifs, bunch of what if this, what if that. But technically, if they were to do this, technically, what the idea does not violate Einstein's laws. I don't believe. I haven't found it. I've seen that said before, and I haven't seen it anywhere where it's been contradicted.
According to the theory, it does not violate Einstein's principle of relativity.
So that's
interesting. If we're going to be honest, though, that theory does have a few errors that haven't been addressed, and there are other theories that seem to address it quite well. So we can't consider what we see so far and what we're told as being the end-all, be-all to all, because it clearly is not.
It's just one man's discovery, and everybody can be flawed. Einstein, for so many things that are right and amazing and clever, we really need to, to be honest, I've always wondered this, like we need the next, we're due for the next Einstein, aren't we? You know what I mean? There's like a lot of guys that are very smart now. We have a lot, we seemingly have, we always talk about how dumb everybody is now, but doesn't it seem like we have some of them, even though, maybe it seems that way, the amount of smart people that we have is got to be greater than ever before, right? Like a lot of people that are very smart, but we are missing that next person to like really blow up the science world, to really break through with this unbelievable theory or discovery. Stephen Hawking? I mean, yeah, Stephen Hawking is, yeah, I guess, I mean, yeah, but I get what you're saying about Stephen Hawking. He has been that person, you're right. But there's still a lot of Stephen Hawking now, I feel like, is a lot of theory and a lot of ideas. Yeah, but Einstein's, all these things that Einstein came up with were instantly applicable. Right? I mean, right? I mean, what Einstein did was immediately applicable. What Stephen Hawking talks about now is more about, you know, it's more theory that turns into reality, right? But it's not on the same level as Einstein. But it's not on the same level as Einstein. What is Stephen? I love Stephen Hawking. He's a genius. But I mean, like, what do we? You know, what is he broken? I mean, I know that they just came out with this new laser thing that they're gonna do. I mean, that's pretty cool. But I mean, where has he set laws of physics? I mean, has Stephen Hawking come out with breakthrough law, you know, ideas of physics like Newton?
Why does he have to come out with ideas of physics?
He hasn't broken anything.
Amazing things on his own.
He has done Lee is arguing with me now. He has done amazing things on his own, but I'm saying, where is this next? I'm looking for the next discovery, the next really big discovery.
He made the leap to find it.
What?
With those lasers, he just helped create the leap to find that next.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He has created the leap to find some things, but I'm waiting for the next, you know, somebody to unlock something. I guess that's what I'm waiting for. Somebody to really like have a vision, have an idea, and then prove it to us. You know? I don't think he's done that recently. Give me an example. Dave? Dave?
Of what I do have to say, I do have to agree with you to a certain extent that yes, Stephen Hawking hasn't come out with a general theory of relativity, but he has been working on a lot of different projects, including what he calls the theory to everything. And it's one of these things that Einstein did not address in his theory, and he actually basically referred to it as an unknown, something that he did not have the ability to address. So there's a lot of holes in some of the theories that or a lot of people hold dear to themselves, but don't truly understand, because there's a lot of stuff that's still out there that hasn't been explained. And I always like to refer people to the electric universe theory, because it seems to address a lot of these issues that aren't able to be answered by Einstein, Hawking's, and a lot of these other individuals.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say every time someone makes a discovery, you know, it moves us forward, and then someone else has to come, and it's like it's like a football game where the guy fumbles the ball and then throws it behind him to the next guy to catch it, to carry it forward. And then you try to get a touchdown. I mean, that's what happens with knowledge and, you know, how we progress. I think a lot of little things happen now where we hand it off to each other and we move forward with things. It happens all the time. I just think I'm waiting for, like, the awakening or just this revelation of something. We're due for some new genius or young person to come up with something and really crack the code here. It's like here, you know, and it takes somebody who is devoted. It takes a young person who's devoted or obsessed with this, like who already by the age of 18 knows everything about what we've discovered and come up with science-wise, and is now starting his thinking process. Or maybe he's younger, or maybe a little bit older, I don't know, but you know, he's already assimilated everything into his brain, and something about what he's thought of is different than what other people have thought of, or he's seen something that others haven't, or he's tried something that others haven't. And every time. It takes somebody like that. It takes somebody who's willing or incapable to absorb some of the smartest and most important and usable knowledge of the science field of science and theories, and to have that all in his brain to move on to something new. It's probably not going
You
to
seem
be.
to be assuming that this is not around, or at least that people should be showing this feature, and who knows if they aren't. I mean, what I'm saying is that there are individuals who have already published information, videos that show certain technologies that we would consider impossible or magical.
Alien.
And either consistently we see this, that either their information is taken away and seized by certain groups that don't want to see this information released, or that these individuals just disappear and they could potentially be working for these organizations or think tanks that want to have this technology but don't want to share it with the public. So we can't necessarily just assume that these individuals who have created these next breakthroughs that you're referring to haven't already presented this to certain groups who have said, you know what, we're going to pay you a lot of money, but you got to keep your mouth shut and you work for us. And groups like this include Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, Boeing's Dark Group, I can't remember what they're called, but you have a lot of different groups throughout the world, not just in America, that essentially recruit these individuals who have displayed this information and said, we want that information, we want that technology, we're more than willing to pay you for it, but you got to make sure that you don't say a word about this from now on. And you can see it consistently with these individuals that are recruited by governments and governmental organizations that basically go black. They just disappear, they stop producing this information for the public to know, and we'll never know whether or not their technology, whether or not their breakthroughs are helping humanity or perhaps being used for some nefarious reason.
And that's something that will seemingly always repeat over time. And maybe that's maybe a big reason why some people don't come out with these type of theories. And it's actually a very important reason as to why, if you are someone who believes they've broken through with something, why you need to hold it close, and only when you're ready, unveil it publicly, and send it to everybody you can think of, really, and not just start working with the government or start working with certain other people. Problem is, sometimes these undertakings require that assistance, and that's where you run into problems. And maybe the next discovery or next theory that gets piled up upon or used will be accidental. Maybe it'll be completely accidental. Maybe it'll be, but our history has shown that everybody, for the most part, who contributes to society, for the most part, in a positive manner or makes a crazy discovery, has always got something to do with mechanical engineering, or they have a big IQ, or they're just smart, or they're on genius level, or they're just a master of science or mathematics. Like, it's always in that area. Sometimes people talk about, it could be just anybody who discovers this, and it's true. Like, you could have a discovery from somebody not like that, but yeah, no, because most of the time these things come from somebody who has a certain IQ or talent for something in engineering, mechanics, mathematics, science, biology, all those things. And it comes from that type of person. I've had people argue with me that, it can just be anybody could make a discovery or come up with something that's true. But, we're not always made aware of these people because they're in such a bubble now. You know what I mean? If they go to a college or they go to a certain area, they're more controlled. They're in a controlled environment, and they don't have to come out and release information. A lot of it is private work. So you just wonder about all the theories that have been successful and shut down, or could be successful, or are close to being successful. And there's more people on this planet than ever before. Anyway, and are we getting assistance from aliens? You know, have any of these people been... Had we talk about breeding with aliens and mixing into the population, have any of these people been related to them? Are they humans? Do they have some sort of different DNA? You know, it's been a while, is all I'm saying, that we've had such a breakthrough. I know Stephen Hawking just released this new project that he's working on that could take 40 to 50 years to really get going, or to really, you know, make a difference. I'll be like, what, 70, 60 when that comes to fruition, if it does. But I think that's really it. I think we covered a whole lot on at least an introduction and a generalization of many different aliens and ideas of them, what they are. And then I think we've talked a bit about, you know, some other topics as well here at the end. We kind of scattered around on different things. But I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add about, you know, extraterrestrials on this episode. I'm sure we're going to come back to this and probably have even more topics about them, and maybe individualize. Maybe we'll go into one race, one believed race, you know, and do a whole episode on one of them versus other ones.
Well, this is just the start, and we've got a lot to work with, so we'll see what we've got in the future.
listening to Final Frontier News.